open government tell us that Chinese people can maintain their culture better by assimilating with China. Open opposition tells us that in the long term there is a trend towards independence of Tibet and why they're going to lose political power in political power and lobbying in a specific way. What we're going to show you is specifically why through this mechanism they are more likely to have to give up and to lose major parts of the religion, therefore it is not worth it for them. Secondly, we're going to engage with closing government and explain why that far outweighs the economic benefits that individual Tibetan people may accrue from this. Before that, a few individual experience points for me. First, they tell us people in Tibet don't care about whether the legislation within their country is by religion. While we may accept that, note that, as Ayal points out in the POI, legislation in China today prohibits the practice of religion and the public display of that religion. That means that specifically... yes, go.
We said that there are more chances because we will now negotiate with the Chinese.
Great, I'll get to that. Don't worry.
To give up on
Great, Monica. I'll get to that and explain why exactly that's something they're not like to give up. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten your case. Okay. Second, they tell us people are attached to religion on varying degrees. Note, the great majority of Tibetans are very religious individuals, given that they have been closed up to the world for a very long time. This is a religion they've been practicing for hundreds of years. There may be some people there who are less religious, but when we look at the interests of people in general, we should look at the majority of them and what they would like to have. Thirdly, they say racism doesn't actually exist and there's an economic incentive. Second, first, note that there is a long-standing national clash between the Tibetans and Chinese. Opening government tells us they are perceived as terrorists. No. Take the example of Palestinians in Israel. If a Palestinian gets Israeli citizenship, it is unlikely that people will now view him as, oh, I'll just take this person to work just like I would take anyone else. We don't think that's a likely scenario. We think that people have a psychological background of fear from those individuals, and we think that's a rational fear to have from their perspective. We don't think it's likely they'll be taken to jobs as much. They tell us that the government will take them into jobs. Note that the people hiring are not the strategic branch of government saying what sort of overarching decision we want to make in order to integrate Tibetans. It's just the shift manager or the clerk in the government in charge of that factory, not likely to happen. Then they tell us why are they going to preserve culture, and I'm getting here to my first point, but just let's see what the closing government actually tells us on this. They tell us firstly, they're going to preserve their culture because there are going to be less in their culture and less in their religion, which is weird. Secondly, they tell us, but there are going to be clerks in the government and they are going to show others. We find it highly unlikely, and this gets me directly to my point, that the Chinese government is going to want people who obey an overarching spiritual authority on many matters to be part of the Chinese government. We find that highly unlikely, and they told us these people will also recognize the symbol of the Dalai Lama and so on. This brings me exactly to my point. Because what is the problem we have with the negotiation point of opening government? No, they tell us that there is no way for Tibetans to maintain their independence today. Like, China is already winning this struggle. Secondly, they tell us, however, that we're able, in this way, to negotiate from a position of power in which we're able to get major concessions from China, specifically in order to achieve our cultural autonomy. We're saying this is highly unlikely by their own analysis. What they're telling us is that the threat from the Chinese sees is specifically the threat of precedents in other areas wanting the same rights. We're saying that specifically this is the threat that they're having when they're allowing a place to have all the advantages of being assimilated within China, and also allowing it to keep its religious practices, and retain its religious leadership. Why is this so problematic specifically for China and the way it's run? No, China is run by a single party. They don't have a functioning opposition parties within that, and the religious leaders specifically are the great place to get grassroots political opposition from. People that have a lot of support from a certain area, that are seen as representatives of that area, and can negotiate with the government in order to get certain concessions and certain rights. Yeah. That is exactly the beginning of opposing political parties. That's exactly what they don't want to show. They don't want to show China negotiating from a position of weakness with Tibetans, because that's exactly when the Ungarians want the exact same thing. No, you got one PR already. Ayal will take you again, I hope. Secondly, they tell us that, just a second. Moreover, note that Chinese words specific towards Tibet, is saying this is a terrible religious regime oppressing its population. This is their propaganda for decades. So just going back on that, we think would be significantly hard for, especially hard for them to do. They're teaching the population that this is the reason they're opposing that regime specifically. For all these reasons, we say it's unlikely specifically they're going to accept the demand for cultural autonomy. They're not likely to get it. Moreover, note that they have a unique time frame right now in which the current Dalai Lama is very old. When it's inherited, it will be a child running the Tibetan people. That is exactly a perfect time for China to get any concession it wants from the Tibetans when they don't have a unified leadership. So assimilating now is probably the worst point in time to do specifically that and to enter negotiations specifically at a time when China has all the upper hand in those negotiations. So we're saying assimilating would mean losing our culture. China simply won't accept a situation in which they retain the religious practices, they return the religious leadership, and this is extremely important to them by open governance criteria. But let's analyze further why losing that identity is so important to those individuals, because TG seem to disagree. We have to look at this debate through the standpoint of a religious Buddhist person, because this is what most of the Tibetan population is. First, death, as open government tell us, death is considered something bad within Tibet, within Buddhism. We dispute that. We honestly have no idea why that's true. We say that a religion that says suffering is the world is suffering is not necessarily a religion that opposed to taking one's life. Specifically note, Buddhist monks did this. This should be quite a good indication that they don't see this as something bad to their religion. Secondly, but moreover, the notion that the world is suffering, no matter which side you have, no matter how many possessions you have, note even further, the possessions you have often create dependence on those possessions, which leads to more suffering. Buddhism, for those individuals, is the only way in which you avoid that suffering. When you can't practice Buddhism, your life will be terrible by their perspective, no matter what earthly possessions you have, no matter what other concessions and gains you may have received. That means that even if they get more money, that is actually a bad thing for them, because they're less able to practice, to avoid suffering, and to achieve nirvana. Extremely proud to oppose the motion. Thank you.